right, folks, we welcome you back, and momentarily we'll be joined by a man who's most qualified to weigh in on the situation in Ferguson, the former mayor of Cincinnati, former Ohio Secretary of State, and senior fellow for the family empowerment at the Family Research Council. Ken Blackwell will join us. So we're going to talk to him about what's going on. Of course, the latest, we have a report, Gateway Pundit reporting, that the police officer in question suffered a compound fracture to his eye socket as a result of being attacked or punched by Michael Brown. We also have a report from a St. Louis Dispatch reporter. She tweeted out that there are 12 eyewitnesses who back up the claim and the storyline of the police officer. We also had a shooting in St. Louis today. Police had to shoot a man, a robbery suspect in a grocery store who had a knife and reportedly would not put the knife down. So he was shot, and I believe he was killed. So it's against the backdrop of all of that that I know where I'll be tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning, sitting in bed, trying to go to sleep, but unfortunately watching the confrontation between protesters and police in Ferguson. I hope there are none. I hope I could go to sleep, but you know, notice more bags than usual. Yeah, I'm not getting my usual 5 hours because I can't turn the TV off. I don't want to miss anything. It's terrible. It's awful. Anyway, all right. Before we go to Ken Blackwell, the former mayor of Cincinnati, I want you to watch and listen to this, and then we'll talk about it.
I think the black community does a disservice to itself when it allows charlatans to these situations, make a name for themselves, and then evacuate the situation. Now, I could drop names, but I think we all know who I'm talking about. And when, for instance...
Sounds like Harpton?
the situation at Duke, for instance, with the lacrosse players, we rushed in, we automatically assumed that the black woman was right and that all these white males in the lacrosse team were wrong. When we found out that she was lying, there was no apology. There was no recognition of the lie. We just moved on. And that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Yeah, well, that's L.G. Granderson on CNN, and joining us now is Ken Blackwell, former mayor of Cincinnati, former Ohio Secretary of State, and senior fellow for family empowerment at the Family Research Council. Ken, always great to talk to you, sir.
Steve, good to be with you.
All right, let me ask you, in your capacities as mayor of Cincinnati and Secretary of State of the state of Ohio, and plus everything else that makes you Ken Blackwell, you're very qualified to weigh in on what's going on today in the town of Ferguson. Where are we right now, do you believe?
We're in a state of confusion and misdirection. What happened has to be clearly examined, and it must be handled according to the rule of law. You know, we must dispassionately establish the facts, and this situation cannot be handled by it being politicized, and that's the issue here. We have an administration that really doesn't have any real regard for the law. It sees itself as being outside of the law, and so what we have now is a situation where we've created a culture of lawlessness, and all of a sudden this lawlessness that's happening in Ferguson in response to the shooting is being waged in the name of some sort of honorable civil rights action. That's crazy, and we must speak to that. Whether Michael Brown's actions justified Officer Wilson shooting him 6 times is ultimately a question for police investigation, possibly a prosecutor and a jury. It is not, the stuff of street drama.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's exactly what it has become. And they were talking about charlatans and it rhyming with Carpton, and they're talking about Sharpton. I had Jesse Jackson on yesterday, and I gave him the police version of the story, as it was told and later confirmed as that version by someone familiar with the investigation. And as I was laying it down, he said, you know, you're giving an extreme account that you know is not true. And I said, well, let's say it is true. I said, would these be circumstances under which a police officer would have a right to shoot someone? He said, no. And I said, well, are there any circumstances under which Michael Brown could have been shot by this police officer and it be justified? And he said, no. That's crazy talk. There's got to be some circumstances under which a perpetrator or a suspect can be shot by a police officer.
These are the same guys that turn a blind eye to the violence and the killing of young blacks all across this country in some of the major central cities of America. Look, there is enough wanton violence in Chicago, in Detroit, and you name the city for the Sharptons, the Jacksons, and leaders on the right to bring focus to. Look, the FBI statistics in 2012, and this was the last year for which these figures were available. Right. You know, about 2,600 whites were killed by white offenders, and 2,400 blacks were killed by black offenders. And that sounds like, those are similar numbers. But when you consider, as Eugene Robinson pointed out the other day, that you know the white population, non-Hispanic white population, is about 5 times as large as the African American population. That means the homicide rate in black communities is surprisingly and startlingly higher. Yep. And that means that if you really are concerned about black lives, the outrage, the insistence for action, constructive action, should be looking at the cultural context that create that sort of, you know, insensitivity and non-appreciation for life and innocence and civility.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, you've written 2 great pieces that I have in front of me, one at townhall.com about President Obama's Goldilocks Mideast policy and one at americanthinker.com about Hillary doing stupid things. Why don't we start with the latter? So why
they merge into the same?
Yes, I was gonna say
they really do. I mean, Hillary Clinton's trying to move away from her political DNA is just hilarious to me. That, you know, she is attached to Barack Obama at the hip. You know, for 4+ years, she was one of the principal architects of Obama's foreign policy. Now that she's bracing herself for 2016, she's trying to put some distance between her political brother and herself. But they're tied together at the hip. She cannot escape him. And the voters of this country are faced with the prospects of a Hillary nomination, which would mean that if she was successful, we would be giving Barack Obama
4 more years,
third term.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that she can't get Americans to suspend disbelief and buy into this notion that she was just an innocent bystander who had nothing to say. I mean, she was right at the heart of this whole notion of, you know, killing bin Laden. Well, you know, the world didn't lose anything of value when bin Laden was taken out of here. The reality is that was not enough. That was their moment of celebration, but they didn't understand the nature of the beast. They didn't understand the fight that we're in. You know, I've traveled all through the Middle East. You know, this was not about a single person. This is about an ideology. And just as Reagan understood that this wasn't just about Gorbachev when he was, in fact, combating the evil empire, it was about an ideology. You had to show that it was of no value, that it was useless, that it was, you know, it was in direct contrast to the movement of history. And by doing that, he was able to defeat it. We must be able to defeat it ideologically. We must be able to defeat radical jihadism. We must be able to defeat it in terms of the world stage. We have to show its illegitimacy. We have to show that it is inhumane. We have to show that it serves no purpose for advancing human history.
And you know what we have to do first? We have to say it. We have to have a president and a State Department that says it, calls it what it is, and then tells us what it consists of. Because right now it's they have you believe it's just a few people who can't get a job, and they're driven to terrorism because they have no way out, and they totally ignore the Islamic.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and these are the same people in charge right now of our foreign policy and our military operation that have gone to sleep on Iran and its building of its nuclear.
Absolutely, Ken.
These are the same folks who hugged Maliki.
Yep.
These are the same folks who will now challenge Assad in Syria.
Ken, you're right on target. I'm up against the clock. Listen, it's always great to talk to you. You got to come back more often, and thank you, sir.
That's the deal.
Take care. Ken Blackwell, ladies and gentlemen, former mayor of Cincinnati, former Ohio Secretary of State, and senior fellow for family empowerment at the Family Research Council. All right, we're coming back. Up next, we're going to talk to a young lady who has a news service from Israel for journalists all over the world. Very interesting. Don't go away.